again. In The Chaos of Cults by Karel von Baalen, Chapter 8 is on Baha'ism. He starts with a quote from Dr. E. Stanley Jones, who was a famous author of that generation, that is the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Jones said, "There is a snag in the statement of the Theosophists and the Baha'is that all religions are basically one and the same and are equally good. Therefore, join the Theosophical Society or the Baha'is on that basis. If they are all the same, why another? In other words, why start a new religion?" To which von Baalen says, "It would indeed seem superfluous. Yet Baha'is report a much stronger response from the public during recent years than ever before." Perhaps Ferguson was right when he stated that no cult bears a gospel better suited to the temper of our times than the Bahai. A movement which claims something over 1 million adherents in nearly every country of the world is worth studying. Dr. Atkins was right in observing that there is among all the cults nothing more curious than that the old controversy as to the true successor of Mohammed, the prophet, should at last have issued in a universal religion with a temple of unity on the shores of Lake Michigan. Now he talks about their history. Baha'ism is of Persian Mohammedan origin, tracing its beginning to the Mohammedan belief that the last true successor of Muhammad, who disappeared in the 10th century, never died, but is still living in a mysterious city, surrounded by a band of faithful disciples, and that at the end of time he will issue forth and fill the earth with justice after it's been filled with iniquity. This hidden successor is said to have revealed himself from time to time through those to whom he has made known his will, and who are known as Babs, or gates, the gate, that is, whereby communication was reopened between the hidden one and his faithful followers. You might remember that Bab is the source of the name of Babylon, being the Semitic word even thousands of years ago for the gate. The last one of these Babs was a young Persian merchant named Mirza Ali Muhammad, who took the title of Bab in 1844, and who had much the same relation to Baha'u'llah as John the Baptist had to Christ. The Bab's career was short-lived. He died a martyr's death at the hand of Persian Mohammedans at the age of 30 years, that is in AD 1850. He had constantly pointed to a divine prophet who was shortly to succeed him. Before his death, he sent his signet rings and writings to one of his friends and foremost supporters, one Mirza Hussein Ali, his senior by 2 years. The two had never met and were not related. Ali at first continued the teachings of the Bab, but soon afterwards announced himself as the divine manifestation predicted by him. He is known as Baha'u'llah, that is, glory of God. The followers of the cult then changed their name from Babs to Baha'is and proceeded to ascribe to Baha'u'llah divine honor and worship. Like the Bab, Baha'u'llah and his disciples suffered much from persecution and exile, which of course only proved once more that the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. Baha'u'llah passed away in May 1892 at the age of 75, after 40 years of hardship, imprisonment, and exile, in his villa of Beja, that is Behje, near Akka in Palestine. He was succeeded by his son, Abbas Effendi, born in Tehran, Persia, May 23, 1844, on the very day upon which the Bab made his declaration to the disciples in Shiraz. Abbas, who had shared his father's hardships as well as his greater ease in his declining years, is known among Baha'is as Abdul Baha, that is, the servant of God. He became the authoritative interpreter of the teachers of the Master, Baha'u'llah. He too has known adversities and persecutions, though not as severe or numerous as those of his predecessors in the cause. In 1912, he visited the United States, where the first disciples were won in Chicago, and where the cause has since grown more rapidly than in any other country except Persia. Abdul Baha died on November 28, 1921, aged 77 years. The leadership of the movement, after some wranglings, fell to his eldest grandson, Shoghi Effendi, the head of a committee of 19 and known by the title of Guardian of the Cause. Now the teachings of Bahai. Baha'ism is the unifying cult par excellence. It has, in the words of Mrs. Chandler, accepted all the religions of the world, found them fundamentally and essentially alike, and reveres equally as divine all 9 of the prophets. So it may appeal equally to Hindus, Muslims, Christians, and Jews. It admits the divinity of the prophet or Messiah of each. It does not even claim any greater divinity for its own particular prophet, Baha'u'llah. It merely claims that the great beauty of blessed perfection, coming later, has brought the latest message from the divine source to the peoples of the world, and that the message doesn't differ fundamentally, or in essence, from the message of his predecessor, but is, one might say, brought up to date in dealing with certain specific matters that didn't concern the people whom Christ or Mohammed addressed. In the words of another Bahai writer, Jesus could not speak of international problems. His people did not know of the existence of Japan. A new revelation for our modern day must therefore complete that brought by Jesus. When Jesus warned to watch and pray for the coming of the Lord, he meant receive Baha'u'llah. This prophet, therefore, referred to Jesus as the Son of God or a manifestation of God, but claimed to be himself a later manifestation. In accordance with these fundamental ideas, and to attain to their unifying ideal, Baha'is present the following principles for which they strive: the oneness of God and oneness of religion, the oneness of mankind, independent search after truth. All prejudices must be abandoned, to wit, religious, color, national, class, sexual, and personal prejudices. International peace, international auxiliary language, education for all, equality for the sexes, abolition of industrial slavery, that is, abolition of wealth and poverty, personal holiness, work in the spirit of service is worship. So we can see why this is so popular for the new spirit of the age. Baha'ism claims that unity and brotherhood are the only important things and not doctrine. Love is the ever-recurring word in its literature. But its conception of love is neither correct nor consistently carried out. In the first place, Baha'ism itself proves that love without certain definite teachings is untenable. When in New York in 1912, Abdu'l-Baha was approached by 2 Baha'is who, arguing a point of Baha'i teaching, asked him to decide who was right. The answer of Abdu'l-Baha was, neither is right. To be a Baha'i, there must never be any discord. All must agree. Unity is the aim. And yet this same system now insists that nothing whatever should be given to the public by any individual among the friends unless fully considered and approved by the spiritual assembly in his locality. The implication is that it is not safe to let individuals air their views on Baha'i teaching except after official approval of their views. The Star of the West is the official organ of the movement in America, and in the next place, if a member of the Baha'is leaves the movement because of changed views, he, or generally she, for this is a ladies' cult like Christian Science, has good reason to hide as far as possible out of reach of the leaders of this loving cult. The last statement can, in the nature of the case, not be backed up by references, but the author vouches for its truth. There is no salvation for apostate Baha'is according to the system. Amazing. Next time we'll talk about the temple, the Wilmette Temple near Chicago. I'll put in a link this time to a document we put together years ago. And this is actually the videos where we read the document itself. And the document is called Slaves of Men, 5 Characteristics of Cultic Groups. I think there's 3 videos altogether, 2 or 3 anyway. I'll put the link to the first one here. See you soon.